Okay, and then the next thing is you want to rework the story. Now you'll notice that on this story, this is the anatomy of a good story. This is in your notes there. This is it's very common. A lot of people understand that. You've got the hook at the beginning, the plot, and it builds to a climax and a resolution. So that's the anatomy of a good story. So as you rework that, you're going to want to put the hook first. Now, hook is often something that is later in the story, and so that's, as you write the story, you don't want to write it in this order necessarily. That's why I'm saying just write it, let it flow, and then as you go back and rework it, you're going to look in that story for what the hook is. And I'm going to give you some examples of what a hook is here in just a second. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But then, you got to work through the plot. You make some progress. There's got to be some progress that happens. Talk about the problem or the challenge that you faced. Work to the climax, the emotional climax, and then a resolution to that. That's if you kind of keep that in mind, that'll help you to include each of those factors in the story you tell, rather than just what happened. So here's some examples of the hooks. So I'm just going to read these and we're going to talk about each one of them, okay? So the creatures came again last night. So again, this is a hook. So these are going to be the first lines of a story. So why is that a good hook? What is it what's happening when you read that line that makes it so it's a good hook? What?
You want to know what the creature is.
Okay, you want to know what the creature is?
What is it? What happened?
And that it came again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so again, so it is the big part of a hook is it elicits curiosity. They wonder what's going on. They want to know, okay, what's going on here? I want to keep reading. Okay, so the next one. Believe me, the last thing we ever expected to find was a snark. So what does that do for you? What's a snark? Okay, what's a snark? Okay, so they didn't start out saying, okay, this is a snark. They didn't start out with that in their story. This is how they started, and that's the hook that hooks you in, captures your interest. Tomorrow when Dad calms down, I'll own up, tell him the truth. He might laugh, he might cry, he might strangle me. Okay?
What in the world did he do?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I thought. What did he do? What did he do with it? And then you also get the interplay between this person and the dad. Okay, so why is this person apprehensive about talking to Dad, and the fact that he's going to own up to it tomorrow? There's you've got some relationship things going on there, and it's all told in this. You get all of that just in this little hook at the beginning. Okay, the next one. Where they came from and how they exploded has never been explained. Okay, again, curiosity. What exploded? What is it you're talking about?
My question would be, what's they?
Yeah, what's they? Yeah, what is they? Are we talking about aliens or what? Okay. Okay, then the last one. We can't open that cupboard, said Dad. I promised my father. Granddad locked it up many years ago, and it's never been opened. What's the thought process you get with that? What is in that cupboard? And when is it going to be opened? Because from that line, it's going to get opened at some point, right? At least that's what it does to me. Okay? So these are hooks. Now, these hooks are usually, like I said, they're going to be part of the last things in your editing. As you're going through a story and you're doing the editing, these are the last things you're going to look for and find. Okay, what's the most interesting aspect of this story? The first night, I don't know how many of you here were the first night, I told a story about, the day my dad came back to life. Okay, well, that, I picked that as the hook. That's not the beginning of the story, that's towards the end of the story. But that's the hook, It creates curiosity. And so that was the hook that I used for my story. Let me give you a little clue on one technique that is very easy to do and is very effective, I found, in writing for ancestors. What you do is you project what you think they might have been feeling or thinking. And you do it in a way, you say, they might have thought, John might have been feeling, and then you say, XYZ, whatever it is. And so by saying that, you're saying, okay, this isn't from his journal, this isn't what he actually wrote, but if I were in that situation, or knowing his historical context that he was in, he probably was feeling this because other people were feeling the same thing. Right. And so, and that way you can interject these feelings and these thoughts that go along with it. You've got an ancestor who moved. He kept moving to places where all of a sudden, there was a dust bowl or there was famine, and they had to keep moving because of all these problems. So you can say, I can imagine that John would have felt, picked on, or you can start talking about the feelings and the thoughts that he might have had. And the reader can pick up on that. They know that it's projected because you're saying he might have felt. Okay, show or tell. There's a place for each in a history, okay? So instead of just saying, I did this and then I did that, you want to show them what happens. That's what we've been talking about. You want to give a little bit more meat of what happened. You show them through dialogue. You show them through, the writing of the context, the historical context. And then you use telling to glue them together, to glue the stories together. So telling goes a lot quicker in a history, and you can't, if you just show the whole way through, it gets too bogged down. You can't just keep showing in a history. You need to glue them together, transition them together, so that you're not telling everything that happened every single day of their life. So instead you take some examples, like when Grandpa was 16, and this one day he was riding his horse into town, and the horse was spooked by a rattlesnake. He got bucked off, and and this happened, that happened. You tell that whole story of what happened that day, and then you use a telling phrase. And then you can say, and then 2 years later, because when he got bucked off, he hurt his back so badly, he ended up with a limp that he had to go to the doctor for. So you see that transitional phase where you're just telling, and it moves the story along, and then you can get to the next story. So there's a place for both in your histories. Don't think that you have to always show or always tell. You want to put both of them in the story. You want to have a good balance there. Okay, here's some writing tips, and these are on your paper here. So you want to tell what you're thinking or desiring at the beginning of the story, and then the reader will be pulling for you to the conclusion. So if you say that, for instance, let's say that you're talking about your first date, and so if you tell about the anxieties you had, or you were so concerned about what you were wearing, and that how you were going to look at the dance, or whatever the situation was, if you tell about that at the beginning of the story, and then as you tell what happened during the story, and when your date spilled the punch all over you, or and you ended up with bats in your hair, whatever the situation was, whatever makes this story happen, the reader's going to be pulling for you because you've told about what you were feeling about at the beginning. Or if you were starting a business and you're going to tell about your beginning of a business, if you tell about what your desire was at the beginning, they're going to be pulling for you as you run across obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. They're going to be pulling for you to get to what you want to have happen. So that's a good writing tip, to tell those things at the beginning of this, towards the beginning of a story. And then tip number 2, write for yourself. So just write it down, get it all down. Don't worry about editing, save that till later. We talked a little bit about that earlier. So as you write that down, just write for yourself. Don't worry so much about who you're writing for on the first copy. Just on the first, this is talking about the first copy, when you're first writing stuff down. Just get it all out, get it down, and then you can work on editing it. The other advantage of being able to get it all down is you can also get somebody else to help you to edit it. But you've got to get the story down first. So if you're not very good at writing, or you need some help and you want to have somebody edit it for you to help you with editing, you can't hire somebody to write the story. You've got to write the story. But after you've got it written, you can get some help in the editing of it. Okay, when it comes time for editing, a real good handy trick is to read it out loud. It makes it so much easier to hear. As you're reading out loud, you'll be able to hear whether it's good writing or not, whether it flows, whether you've got really long sentences or a whole bunch of short ones. It really helps you to spot some of the problems if you read it out loud. One tip, if you do that, tell the person in the next room that you're talking to yourself, you're reading it out loud. You're not trying to get their attention, so that they're wondering what in the world you're doing in the other room. Okay, so reading out loud is a good editing technique. Yes, when you read out loud, you will find words that were left out, or that you wouldn't spot as you read, because your mind does put those in. Excellent, thank you for that. And then here's the last 3 tips. So don't wait for the perfect time. There isn't a perfect time. You pick your best time, pick some time wherever you can. If you're always waiting for the perfect time to work on it, it'll never get done. You may get a little bit here and there, but you'll never get done. Just work through it, do the best you can, and work through it, and just keep going on it, working on it. Pick the best time you can, but don't wait for the perfect time. And then have fun. Remind yourself of what your purpose was. We talked about the purpose on the first night. Remind yourself of what that purpose was, who you're writing it for, and go back and say, oh yeah, I want this for my grandkids, or I want this, for my extended family to be able to know about Grandpa, because they don't know about Grandpa like I know about Grandpa. And so you remind yourself of what you're doing, and then make sure you're having fun with it. Laugh about the stories that they were doing. Go back and read some of those stories that can get you excited about it again. But yes, it is overwhelming. When they say to do that, it's overwhelming. And so that's why, again, my suggestion really is to start with the easiest story first. That's what I'm doing with my history. I haven't written my whole history yet. I'm writing stories. I'm just writing them one story at a time. And I'm not even gluing them together yet. I'm just writing all the stories. And eventually, when I'm ready to publish it, then I'm going to take those stories and I'm going to glue them together. And then I'm going to add some other, some of the other transitional things and data things. And then the last tip, keep the end product in mind, like we talked about, what you're trying to do. And that brings up, thank you for that. And that reminds me of one more point I want to make, and that is, we don't need to be professional writers. Our histories don't need to be, the best novel type thing. That's not the point that I'm trying to make here. The point is, we want to just do the best we can and make it as interesting as we can. And as you learn, these are all learned techniques. It's not something you're born with or not. You can learn how to be a better writer. And as you learn these things, it really will make a difference. And you don't have to be, somebody a Tolstoy, or, somebody who's a great writer. You just do the best you can, and it'll be fine. But spending a little bit more time in the technique of writing will really enhance your history as you go back and edit it in that regard.